Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. This is your World War III update. We are talking about World War III today. But before I get started, I want to encourage you to support this channel. I receive no money from YouTube or advertisers, and this channel is completely funded by people like you. So hit me up with a donation there in the description. You'll find all the links. If you enjoyed this video or any other videos on this channel, please consider supporting it. And don't forget to give me a thumbs up and to share the video and to subscribe and check your subscription, because you know how sneaky they can be about unsubscribing people. All right, so this first story about World War III, one of the things I find very interesting is that mainstream media is kind of ignoring this. And I think it's because it hurts their narrative in Ukraine that to report on this might cause them to kind of look hypocritical from here on out. But the big news that should be in the news, but when you look on the news, all you're seeing is Harris, Trump. And they're not reporting on this like they ought to be, in my opinion. But would you be surprised to know that Ukrainian forces invaded Russia? Don't. Russia's been invaded. So what happened was, I guess we sent those F-16s out there and they went right to work, blazing a hole in Russian defenses on the Russian border, and about 1,000 Ukrainian forces invaded Russia with armored vehicles and troops on foot and with artillery. And they're several miles inland now. This has been going on for a few days. One of the biggest losses in Russian forces occurred when they started to send reinforcements to reinforce the Russian line there and protect their homeland. And I'm assuming it was F-16s. It could have been any kind of aircraft, but Ukrainian forces destroyed a column of Russian soldiers, and they claimed they killed between 250 and 490 Russian soldiers who were going to there to act as reinforcements to defend the border. And reports coming from Russia and video on the ground by Russian citizens confirm that Ukraine has taken several Russian villages and occupied them, and that they are not just doing this as a strike in and out or a quick hit, that they invaded across the Russian border into Mother Russia, and they are digging in. They are creating defenses, and they are establishing control of Russian territory within the borders of Russia. You think this would be giant news. You think this would lead the story on every news network, but it doesn't appear to be a big story to them, but it is to me. And a big part of it is that the main reason for defending Ukraine is that Russia invaded them. But now Ukraine has invaded Russia. Do we defend Russia's right to self-defense? So now, I mean, it's just a matter of mutual invasion. You know, Russia invaded Ukraine, Ukraine invaded them back. And so it's interesting, though, to me, one of the biggest compelling things about this is yet another Putin red line. Putin said over the past few months, if you send U.S. or NATO troops into Ukraine, into the battlefield, that we will consider that an attack by the United States. They said they might possibly use nuclear weapons in their defense. And they also said if you give them, intermediate range offensive weapons that can reach into Russia and you put them in Ukraine, that we'll consider that an act of war. Then they said if you fire them into Russian territory and attack us on our own soil, we'll consider that an act of war and we'll respond appropriately. And every one of these red lines that Russia's laid down, NATO and Ukrainian forces have just trampled over. The United States doesn't give two bits about Putin's warnings, and he keeps warning them, and the United States and NATO troops keep crossing the red line. He also said if Russian territory was invaded by any foreign troops, that would be grounds for them to use nuclear weapons if necessary for their defense. And we just ignored that, and now Ukrainian forces, and Ukrainian pilots flying American F-16s. They say they're Ukrainian. I believe you. Hey, they got a crash course on how to fly an F-16. But at any rate, they've been very effective, and they've invaded Russia, crossing yet another Russian red line. So, do you believe that Putin will do something this time? Will he use tactical nuclear weapons? Will he carpet bomb Kiev? You know, there's a large force of Russians in Belarus, and Belarus could invade Kiev from the north. So there is definitely potential now to widen this war. And I find it very interesting that they're not talking about how, for the first time since this war started, the Ukrainian military, under the advisement, control, and with the help of NATO forces, have invaded Russia and taken Russian civilian villages hostage, have taken many prisoners of war, and have killed a lot of Russians on Russian soil. I don't see this one going unanswered. I'm starting to think that Putin's never going to do anything. He keeps telling them, if you do this, I'll do something. If you do this, I'll do something. And they just keep doing it. But it does feel a little bit like a bully backing somebody into the corner, and this person is telling them, I have a gun, I will defend myself, and the bullies just don't believe it, and then until it's too late, until the person comes out blasting. So I expect there to be eventually some kind of response from Russia beyond just their normal thing they're doing, which is just grinding down the Ukrainian forces over time in Ukraine. But now the fight is in Mother Russia. Can you imagine what the Americans would do if Mexican forces crossed over the border into Texas, took Texas towns, and started digging defensive positions in on American soil? It would, right? So it's not a stretch of the imagination to think that Putin is going to do something at some point. Now that I've covered that main piece of news, let's talk about the waiting game that's going on in Israel right now. So Israel is not officially taking credit for the killing of the Hamas leader in Tehran over a week ago, 10 days ago. But the whole world knows they did it. The supreme leader and the president have both said they're going to attack Israel. And Israel has been on high alert. They closed down the airspace in and around in the neighboring countries around Israel. Egyptian Airlines has been warned not to operate in the airspace in that area because the Israelis are certain that Iran is going to attack them. And I think Iran is just enjoying the nervousness, right? They're not in any hurry to respond to that. Some are saying they're still deciding how and if they're going to respond to it. Meanwhile, Israel's shut down. Businesses are closing. People are leaving out of the major metropolitan areas that they fear might be attacked by Iran. And I think it's just kind of funny that they're just to the point where the Israelis were saying, maybe we just attack them first. We're just tired of waiting on them to attack us. So there's definitely some mind games going on there. As you know, the Iranians can wait forever to respond to that assassination. And they might respond and they might not. But every day is costing Israel money, and it's costing them and American troops time and effort to be on their high alert. So the longer the Iranians wait to attack, the better for them it is, and the more frustrating it gets on the other side. It's like waiting. The waiting game is too much for them. I think it's kind of funny. It's like their own paranoia is getting to them. What if Iran just decides not to do anything? You know, they've done very little. They keep getting attacked, and they've done really very little to respond to Israeli incursions into Iran. Various attacks, various assassinations. And they may just sit back on their heels and wait for Hezbollah to deal with it from Lebanon. And that's definitely heating up. And I think it's inevitable that the Israelis will invade Lebanon to go after Hezbollah. And so you've got that going on in the world. And it's not really being talked about because we're just overwhelmed with Harris, Trump, and Walls or whatever his name is. The guy who was you know on the front row of people that were about to be sent into war in Afghanistan, and when it came his turn, he quickly retired. So a lot of the people that he trained were very offended that he didn't go to war with them. When it was time for them to go to war, he got out. So, and then he's going around telling people that he was actually in war. You can be in the military and never see war. He's one of those people that was in the military and never saw a war, but claimed he did. That's a big thing that's going on right now. But that's what the news is talking about. Meanwhile, Ukraine's invaded Russia. Israel and Iran are in a Mexican standoff, and with weapons pointed at each other, just waiting to see who's going to strike first. But all of this made me start to really think about World War III. Is World War III, and I believe we're in World War III right now, is it really a world war, or is this more like a worldwide civil war? Don't, don't, don't. You know, in previous world wars, in World War II, you had nationalist nation rise up against nationalist nation. You know, Germany invaded sovereign Poland and started World War II. And you have nation against nation. But that's not really what we're seeing at this point in history. What we're seeing is a lot of civil wars that are turning into bigger affairs. If you want to get right down to it, the war in Ukraine was a civil war, and Russia decided to intervene and defend people that were pro-Russian that were involved in the Ukrainian civil war. And this was an intervention to put an end to a multi-year civil war that had been going on in Ukraine for a very long time. You know, people don't talk about that. They act like Ukraine was this one big happy family, and then the Russians just decided to take it over, when in fact it was a Russian response to a civil war. And we're starting to see internal conflicts within every nation, that we don't have strong national identities going up against other strong national identities as much as we have civil wars breaking out all over the world. Now, who's causing this? Are they related? Is there any thread that connects all of these civil wars to one another and connects the dots that civil wars could be the cause of World War III? That World War III is going to look very different. It's going to be a series of nations who are involved in internal civil wars with other countries intervening, or the United Nations intervening. So, look at what's going on, for instance, in Venezuela. See, it has to do with elections. These civil wars are breaking out over contested elections. The civil war that broke out in Ukraine was over a contested election. There is a potential civil war about to break loose in Venezuela over a contended and contentious election. Are intelligence agencies from around the world trying to control elections? Are they cheating? Are they engaged in voter suppression? Are they engaged in actual voter fraud? Are they changing ballot counts? And you have to ask yourself, has the United States ever done that kind of thing in other countries? And I think it's a documented, undeniable yes, that ever since the Cold War, ever since the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States, the CIA and also Russian intelligence have actively been involved in swaying elections through misinformation, through voter fraud, through voter intimidation. And this has been going on for many years. And it just now appears that this is starting to happen in America. We have a contested election in 2020. This one is likely to be another contested election here. We've got civil unrest on the streets in the United States, on the streets in UK. It looks like Thailand is having the same sort of problems there, where the party in power has outlawed one of the opposing parties in Thailand and actually made it illegal for them to operate. And 1/3 of the government is from that opposition party. And now those people haven't been arrested, but there is some rioting or some protest that's occurring there over this. And you're starting to see this in every nation, that this time around, instead of a nationalist nation being up against another nationalist nation defending their national interest, what you really have is this giant battle between good and evil. You've got a disruptive force that's trying to destabilize every nation, erase all borders, and is with a global intention. The intention to do away with nations, to do away with borders, to do away with elections, to do away with constitutional rights, and have a totalitarian global government. So what you have is these countries are being split down the middle, and the wars that are happening are an intervention from outside forces. You've got the civil uprising, civil war going on in Haiti, Venezuela, particularly, could be Thailand. You've got massive civil unrest in the UK recently, in England. You've got disruptive protests going on in Canada and in the United States. And this is starting to look more and more like that society from every nation is being divided between good and evil, between freedom loving and freedom suppression, between open and free elections and the control of the narrative. That you have these individuals who are operating within every nation around the globe, who all seem to have the same kind of intention and are engaging in the same kind of tactics to destabilize every nation on planet Earth. The only place this isn't really happening, well, actually, I'm even hearing of civil uprisings in China. We had a civil uprising and a break of a civil war, or a peak of a civil war going on in Russia recently. And so there's this destabilization happening in every nation. And it just makes me think of the sheep and the goats. In Matthew 25, Jesus in the end times will gather all of the people from every nation, and he will judge each person by how they treated their fellow man. Did you treat your fellow man with love? Or did you treat them with oppression? Did you treat them with disdain? Did you fail to help them or even cause them grief and sorrow? And ultimately, we're all going to be judged on this, and we're going to be separated. The sheep who love their neighbor and the goats who are selfish, self-minded, and self-serving. And I talked about this back even before COVID, that I believe there was a spiritual component to this, where the demons are getting full control of some of the people, and God is getting full control of the rest of the people. And it seems like this division that makes the Battle of Armageddon possible, because in the Bible it tells us that the Battle of Armageddon consists of a group of people who are essentially good and a group of people who are essentially evil, the armies of Satan and the armies of light, and how they have one final battle. This division within our nation, this division in UK, the divisions in every nation around the globe, is a symptom and sign of good and evil separating into separate and definable camps. No longer are we being intermingled together. We're making ourselves known. Those who are in favor of freedom and free speech and human rights and human dignity are aligning on one side, and those in favor of totalitarianism, assassination of leaders, the starting of wars and civil disturbances, riots, and the battle lines are being clearly drawn between the army of light and the army of darkness. I guess the first time I heard this said out loud in reference to what's going on in the world came from Alex Jones a few years before he was taken off of YouTube. That for a while there, a lot of his shows, he would repeatedly say that this isn't World War III we're looking at. This isn't simply a civil war in America, but what this is a global civil war that these elements that are working against good in the United States are in every country working against good, working against freedom, and working for totalitarianism. We saw their true stripes during the lockdowns of 2020 and 2021 when they said, we don't really care about your constitutional right. We don't care that you have a right to freedom of religion. We're going to shut down your church. We don't care that you have the right to assemble, the right to travel. We're going to restrict you and say you have to stay in your homes. It was a global declaration of martial law against the people. And this was quickly forgotten when the lockdowns were over and the threat was gone. But most of us have not forgotten that when push came to shove, most of our leaders, Republicans and Democrats, were in favor of stomping on your constitutional rights for the public safety. And so we have not forgotten this. They came out, they decloaked, they showed us who they are. I'm a big supporter of Trump, and I absolutely cannot stand the Democratic Party. I think the Democratic Party as a whole and anyone who votes for them is evil to their core. And I base a lot of that on their rabid pro-abortion stance, where they're just really obsessed with ending the lives of infants in the womb. And that alone shows me what side they're on, that they're completely embracing evil at its root. And they're rabid about it, right? They're absolutely obsessed with it. And so I got a problem with the Democrat Party, but I'm not a Republican, honestly, to tell you the truth. I'm what you would call a moderate. I'm what you would call a centrist until all this happened. But the left went so far left that all that's left is elements of the Republican Party. But that, I say just elements, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Babbitt, Josh Hawley, Donald Trump, right? I guess Ted Cruz is kind of on our side now. I would have put him on the Rhino side, because there are Republicans that are just no different really than Democrats, except on some key issues, which they seem to never actually do anything about when they're in power. It's just a talking point for them to claim they're on the right. And really, they're just globalists. There's globalists on the right and globalists on the left in American politics. But there is a core group of constitutionalists at which Donald Trump is the head of them. And, I was a supporter of JFK, but honestly, he's one of these people who believes in freedom on some things and not on others. And he's not an anti-war candidate at all. And only in Ukraine. He's pro-war in Israel and anti-war in Ukraine. So, I really see him as the last of the honest Democrats, that he's basically what Democrats used to be. But, that doesn't put him in the camp of the populists, really. The populists believe in your constitutional rights. The rhinos and the far left believe in your constitutional rights when it suits them. And there needs to arise in all of these nations people who believe in the individual freedoms of their citizens, their right to keep and bear arms, their right to public photography, their right to freedom of speech, their right to free dissemination of what they believe to be the truth. This whole idea that the First Amendment is limited and you don't have a right to spread disinformation. Yes, you do. Because who gets to decide what is information and what is disinformation? There isn't a system to decide that. So it's open, free speech for everybody or none of us. And that's the problem with the far right and the far left. Not the far right, the rhino right, the globalist right, and all of the Democratic Party today, is that they only believe in free speech for themselves. They only believe in standing up for their rights. Their rights matter and your rights don't. What happened to, I may not agree with you, but I would fight and die for your right to say it? That's what we used to say when we encountered people we didn't agree with. We would say, I don't agree with you, and I don't like what you're saying, but I would fight and die for your right to say it. And that includes what they call disinformation. Last time I checked, lying to the public ain't illegal. And if it was, all you people in mainstream media would be going straight to prison, along with most of the politicians in this world and all of the lawyers, right? Lying to the judge under oath is illegal, but disinformation is a made up thing. I have the right to say whatever I want in this country, right? Under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, and the government cannot stop me. And those who think they can are communists and anti-American and are against everything the Bill of Rights stands for. And I don't care if there's an R or a D or an I in front of your name. If you're not in favor of free speech, you're the enemy of the United States Constitution and the people who framed it. So, this isn't a battle between Republicans and Democrats. It's a battle between people who believe in freedom and people who believe only in their own freedoms and not yours. And I stand behind this. I do not like what you're saying. I do not agree with what most of you are saying out there in this world on every side. But I would die for your right to say it, because that's what free speech is. Not just free for you, but free for everyone. Tell me what you think in the comments section. Is this World War III something very different than past wars? Is it becoming a battle between good and evil within every nation, within every state, within every neighborhood, within every friend group, within every family? And does this line up with Matthew 24, when Jesus said, brother shall rise against brother and nation against nation? Brother against brother suggests civil war right down to the family level. Is this a civil war for the hearts and minds of people throughout the world? Or is this a traditional, world war we're engaging in right now and about to engage in? Tell me what you think in the comments section. Don't forget to support the channel, and we'll see you next time on the end of the world as we know it.